Welcome everybody to the presentation on the Mālikī madhhab. This is a really good breakdown that Sheikh Mateen has established for us, which is on the roots, contributions, historical solutions, and future relevance of the Mālikī school. As we all know, the qat'iyat of the religion, the aqidah is like the roots of a tree, and then the trunk consists of the qat'iyat. There's no fiqh on certain things that are well known and established and don't need any interpretation, such as the fact that we have 5 prayers a day, or the fact that we have that alcohol is or intoxicants are forbidden, things like this. So there is fiqh obviously in matters of khilaf, matters of difference, and so that's why it's important to know these madhabs, to know what exactly is what are the usul, what are the methodologies to go about answering these differences. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel. These schools already exist. So let's just dive straight into this. All right, now the roots of the madhab, it doesn't actually start with Imam Mālik. The Mālikī madhab starts way before that with Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. All right. I'm going to have to keep looking to make sure this is clicking to the right one. And the Mālikī madhab is actually the madhab of the city of Madinah, and it's really nothing other than a codification of what were the opinions and methodologies of the scholars of Medina, the people in Medina at the first 3 generations. Imam Mālik does not really bring so much of his own ideas. Rather, what he does is he gathers these ideas and he elevates what he felt and what he saw is the predominant idea in the Mālikī school. So when you look at Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he comes as the mujaddid, as a prince to the city of Medina of the Umayyads. And in his 20s, he's given the job of governing the city. He has a choice when he gets there, and he's just a regular Muslim youth like everybody else and a wealthy young man, and now he's governor. He has a choice to respect or disrespect the scholars of Medina. And this happened very early on. Actually, is that the computer that's showing the slides? Where is that computer? Can you actually put it just there so I know what slide is up? That would be great, thanks. What is it? Yeah, perfect, thank you. Then I don't need this. Okay. So, he has a choice. Should I respect them? Do I honor them? Or I just rule over them? He decides to respect them. And when he respects them, he decides to become his student, their student. And at this point, he slowly goes from governor to student to becoming a sheikh himself. He eventually selects 7 advisors. And these are the al-fuqaha as-sab'ah. These are so important in the history of the Mālikī school. Al-fuqaha as-sab'ah. Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, Urwa ibn al-Zubayr. These are all either children, direct children, or grandchildren of companions. That's how strong the roots of the Mālikī school are. Sa'id and Urwa, Qasim, Ubayd, Kharija, Sulaiman. And then the 6th one is Abu Salama, son of Abdurrahman, son of Abdurrahman ibn Auf. So the direct son of Abdurrahman ibn Auf. Sa'id ibn Musayyib, we know he's the top student of Abdullah ibn Umar. Top student. Urwa ibn Zubayr is the nephew of Aisha. Son of Zubayr is the nephew of Aisha. And he took most of his knowledge from Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, and he excelled past all of his peers because he could enter in upon a Sayyida Aisha without hijab. Qasim is the grandson of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. We know Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr as-Siddiq was of course caught up in the fitna of Sayyidina Uthman, but Qasim is also then that would make him another nephew of Aisha. So you see here, the first three, one is a direct student of Abdullah bin Umar, who is a direct student of his father, Umar ibn Khattab. The next two are the nephews of Aisha, radiallahu ta'ala anha. Kharija ibn Zayd bin Thabit. There's not Zayd ibn Haritha, this is Zayd bin Thabit, the scribe of the Quran. The Prophet's number one scribe of the Quran, this is his son. So immediately you see here, that's why some people call this madhhab the madhhab of Umar and Aisha. Why else Umar ibn Khattab? Because his fatawa, his policies are occurred in Medina. Everybody knew his fatawa and his policies. So they were established in the city. Then you have Sulaiman ibn Yasar, and then you have Abu Salama, the son of Abdurrahman ibn Auf. There were two others who were very close to these seven that Umar ibn Abdul Aziz relied upon. Remember, we are looking at Umar ibn Abdul Aziz and the seven jurists, al-fuqaha as-sab'ah, to whom Malik returns always for his fatawa. And why is he returning to them? He's returning to them because Umar ibn Abdul Aziz used them to rule the city, to rule the city and then the empire after that, or the whole khilafah. So when he uses them, that's a massive tazkiyah. And they also, their rulings were not theoretical rulings. What if this happens? No, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz would come with actual masail that are happening in daily life. Salim ibn Abdullah ibn Umar, again, Salim, the son of Abdullah ibn Umar, is alongside Sa'id ibn Musayyib, the first person on this list. He's the most knowledgeable of the second generation, Sa'id ibn Musayyib. He's the most knowledgeable. And he's a direct student of Abdullah ibn Umar. What is the greatest tazkiyah? Tazkiyah is like giving your reference to somebody or giving a word of approval. One of the best tazkiyah of Sa'id ibn Musayyib is that when Abdullah ibn Umar got old, he used to just refer complicated questions to Sa'id. That goes to tell you how much knowledge he had. Is that the Sahabi Abdullah ibn Umar used to say, go to Sa'id when he got old. And then you have, we forgot, Ubaydullah ibn Abdullah ibn Utbah ibn Mas'ud. So this, you have to follow this a little bit. Utbah ibn Mas'ud is the brother of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. So Ubaydullah is his grandson. So the grandson of Ibn Mas'ud's brother. That's Ubaydullah ibn Abdullah ibn Utbah ibn Mas'ud. And then you have, finally at the bottom there, Abu Bakr ibn Abdul Rahman ibn al-Harith ibn Hisham al-Makhzumi. Let's go to Malik's teachers. While Malik took from the seven jurists his fatawa and masail of khilaf, he had three main teachers that formed the foundation of his whole religion. We separate our fiqh and our aqeedah and our tasawwuf, that came later. But in the beginning, it's all one, it's all deen. Imam Malik, he said a man will go to the same teacher for 30 years. He meant himself and Abdurrahman ibn Hurmuz. Abdurrahman ibn Hurmuz took Malik on as a private student when Malik was very young. Took him on as a very private student. And Malik said, I never mixed teachers for 7 years. For 7 years I had one sheikh, and I never went to another halaqah besides that. Never sat in anybody else's circle. That formed his basis. Ibn Hurmuz's concern was heresy and aqeedah. And so what the Mālikīyya, their descendants, the students of Imam Malik, they ended up adopting the Ash'ari creed. Because of how, and the Mālikīyya were not lukewarm about aqeedah. They were not unknown in Aqidah, they were staunch in Aqidah. Where did they get this staunchness from? From their Shaykh, from Malik himself. And when people say Malik, his Aqidah was Aqidat al-Athar, and he spoke about the prohibition of kalam, and you never find these masa'id being spoken to about Malik. They say, look, first of all, he can only speak about what exists in his time and place. The kalam that exists in his time was the kalam of the Mu'tazilites. They failed at it. Imagine this. Imagine we're living in a world before the internet. And then the internet gets developed. And the only people who have a website are the Shia. Nobody else has websites. So you can imagine now a scholar saying, going to the internet is haram, for knowledge is haram. Why? Because at the time, the only website that existed was a heretical website. That's it. So that's why the phrase, the internet is haram, is no different than Malik's when the early fuqaha saying, kalam is haram, because the only kalam that existed was, at that time, misused and appropriated ideas that had nothing to do with Islam. But the concept of using our minds to consolidate or bring together two seemingly opposing verses or hadiths, or refuting heretics, no one differed with that. No one disallowed that. So Ibn Hurmuz is at the root of Malik's concern with heresy in Aqidah. And Malik was even more stern regarding heretics than his successors after him. For example, Malik said, جميع أصحاب الأهواء كفار. He did not have a concept of believers, of Muslims, innovators, and apostates, or zanadiqa. He did not separate deviation in Aqidah into two categories as we do today. We do. We say if it's qat'i, if it's an explicit text you're deviating from, but it's not well known, then you're an innovator. And if it's an explicit text that is well known, you're a zindiq, you're out of Islam altogether. We're not burying you, your marriage is null and void, we don't befriend you, like you're not a Muslim at all. But that middle ground, the innovator, is a gray area in which certain relations can continue. You are a Muslim, you can go to Mecca and Medina, we will bury you, but certain things are sinful for us to do with you, and your good deeds don't count until you fix your belief. So Ibn Hurmuz was huge influence on Imam Malik. And you could see that Malik's students took this on, and they became the best proponents of the Ash'ari Aqidah. And then the Shafi'iyya joined them in that. Next you have Rabi'atul Ra'i, Malik's first fiqh teacher. Fiqh and usul were one and the same in those days. Usul is how we get the ruling, and fiqh is what the ruling actually is. So famously, Malik's madhhab is known by the doctrine of al-amal, amal ahl al-Madinah, which is essentially that when it's sort of a misnomer in a sense, the actions of the people of Medina. It's not the actions of the people of Medina, it's two things. Number one, the fatwa of the scholars of Medina, what they agreed upon as a fatwa. The fatwa of the scholars of Medina. That's one part of it. The second part of it is the mutawatir things that occur in the city of Medina that is impossible to have been changed in 2 generations. Such as weights and measures, the adhan, how to pray, what coverage does a woman have to have. These things are impossible to change in a city of 15 to 20,000 people at that time over 1 generation. So whatever the tabi'een were upon, and that must have been what the Sahaba were upon, because as we said earlier, this group here, They are the children and grandchildren of the Sahaba. And Malik is of the third generation. He's documenting what they did. It's impossible that they have gone astray in these social things. How to pray, when to break the fast, how the adhan is called, what to wear, things like that. That would be impossible. So that's a second part of the meaning of Amal Ahl Madinah. Where did Malik get this? He got it from Rabi'atul Ra'i. Rabi'atul Ra'i was walking one day when his student Malik was very young, and he came to him and he said, how is it that we do such and such, but there is a hadith that says such and such, the opposite? Thereupon, Rabi'atul Ra'i made his famous statement, ألف عن ألف أحب إلي من واحد عن واحد. Which means we have gotten our religion from 1,000 people, meaning mutawatir. This is how we practice our religion. This is what we do here in Medina. The scholars and the people and everyone in between. That is stronger evidence to me than a narration that's coming from outside of Medina that one person said that the Prophet ﷺ said. If that's the case, why don't we see it here? Where the Prophet lived for 10 years, where Abu Bakr ruled for 2 years, where Umar ruled for 10 years, where Uthman ruled for 13 years, where Umar Abdul Aziz ruled. We should see it here. So that he is the one who established that amal is mutawatir, and therefore it is stronger than the solitary sahih hadith. That is the number one thing that you need to know about the history of the Maliki madhab and how their usul differs from everybody else. Is that the amal follows the mutawatir hadith. And amal is mutawatir in its nature, therefore it is stronger evidence than the ahad, solitary sahih hadith. Now, if you don't know these terms, let me explain to you very, very simply. How does a word transmit to people? How does it get to you? If any statement, or how is it seen from the Prophet? If it's seen by 1 or 2 or 3 people, we call that ahad. If the event is seen by so many people that it's impossible to be a lie, it's impossible for them to change it. For example, can anyone deny 9/11 happened? No, because there were hundreds of thousands of people in New York, in New Jersey, that saw the whole thing go up in flames. Discounting TV. TV doesn't count. TV can be corrupted. But how many people saw the moon landing? How many people physically saw a human being walking on the moon? Definitely not mutawatir. Although it spread, the image spread, but that's an image. The actual event, who saw it? Few people. Therefore, doubt can be cast upon it. So what is stronger in certainty? The fact that 9/11 happened or the fact that the moon landing happened? Of course, 9/11, right? Because we saw it. So that's called mutawatir. You can never say it's a lie. Nobody can deny it. If you deny it, you're crazy. But if you deny the moon landing, you're up for a debate. It's debatable. Okay? The opposite of that transmission is called ahad. It just came from a few people. So the moon landing, we are taking it if we trust the transmitters. If we trust the people who say they saw the moon landing, then we can accept it. If we don't, but it still will never reach the level of certainty that you have that 9/11 happens. That's the difference between mutawatir and ahad. And so Malik deems the amal of Ahl al-Madinah to be mutawatir, and therefore it's stronger. That is when the people of Medina all do something in one way, or the muftis of Medina gave a fatwa. Okay. Both of them are stronger than anything else. Of course, aside after the Sahih Hadith that's mutawatir and the Quran, when it's explicit in its meaning. Lastly, we come to Ja'far al-Sadiq. Sayyidina al-Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq was very influential on Malik, the teenager. Imam Malik, as a youth, he used to go and sit in the majlis of Ja'far al-Sadiq. And Ja'far al-Sadiq was a sheikh at that time, meaning he was older. And he took from Ja'far al-Sadiq the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He took his his taqwa, he took his ibadah, he took his hal. Hal is the person's state. So we can say, in Aqidah, Malik took from Ibn Hurmuz. In Usul, he took from Rabi'atul Ra'i. And his sheikh in Tariqah was Ja'far al-Sadiq. His sheikh in matters pertaining to the heart. Well, what's an example of that? Malik's family asked him, why is it that now suddenly you've changed? Every time the Prophet is mentioned, you sit up, you change, and your face becomes serious. He said, if you have seen what I've seen from Ja'far al-Sadiq, he wouldn't blame me for this. In other words, Sayyidina al-Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, his love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was so apparent that when you sit with him and the Prophet's name is mentioned, he changes. So Imam Malik took from Ja'far al-Sadiq all the matters of the heart. He said, I never saw from Ja'far al-Sadiq except that he was reciting Quran, or he was praying nafilah, or he was fasting. All right, so many people say, all right, fine, we accept the amal. Where can I find the amal of Ahl al-Madinah? First of all, the main source of the amal is Malik himself. His 40 years of teaching in the city of Medina and repeating what their amal is to every student that he gets and in every halaqah that he teaches, ended up in 7 major books. Ad-Dawaween, just as we have the 7 jurists, now we have the 7 books. It's easy to remember the Maliki school. 7 jurists are the root fuqaha. They are the chiefs of the scholars. They're not the only scholars. Malik had 600 teachers. 300 from the tabi'een and 300 from the tabi'een. 600 teachers. But the 7 were the strongest at the time. And then there are 7 books in which the amal of Ahl al-Madinah and the Maliki madhhab and Malik's opinions are documented. This could take you from there, possibly all the way to this stage, as books. The Muwatta is the shortest one. It's only 2,000 entries. And then you have the Mudawwana of Sahnun, the Wadiha, the Mustakhraja, the Mawaziyya, the Majmu'a, and the Mabsuta. 7 mother books that gather Malik's knowledge and what Malik said about different matters and what Malik said about the amal of Ahl al-Madinah. All right. If you have any questions on that, write them down and we'll go back and we'll go one at a time on these issues. All right, let's go to contributions. The first major contribution to methodologies of attaining Islamic law is istihsan and maslaha as an asl. What does that mean? That means that the Maliki scholars and the Maliki madhhab deems a knowledgeable scholar is capable of attaining and understanding with his mind what is beneficial and what is harmful. Okay. Benefit and harm is what the Sharia says is benefit and harm, right? Good and bad is what the Sharia says. That's the origin. The origin is that good and bad is whatever Allah says is good and bad. But the Malikiyya, they deemed something else that has far more impact on their future contributions than the amal. Everybody knows the amal, right? This is a famous thing. But the amal really impacts things that are fixed, like our acts of worship and things like that. Going forward though, in how we answer future questions, the istihsan, which is judging with your mind what's good and bad, and maslaha, seeing what's beneficial to the community, is an asl. It's not an afterthought, it's not a maybe, it's an asl. And fatwa can be given by that. What is fatwa? Fatwa is, the ruling is this, the situation is different, and therefore, we're going to not use the ruling here, we're going to use something else. What's an example? One of the most famous examples of maslaha or istihsan. If I catch a spy, Am I allowed to inflict pain on him to hear the truth from him? This is debated in general. It's always been debated in general, can you do this or not in war? But the Mālikī said, if you can save more people by learning, if you can avoid more harm by learning what is it that he knows, then yes, you can do a lesser harm to avoid a greater harm. And that's the concept. Ad-dararu yuzal. Harm should be removed. Because of this, it is the Mālikī scholars who are the foremost in a subject matter called Maqasid al-Sharia and Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya. Al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya. Ash-Shatibi and the Furuq by Qarafi are the greatest examples of that. Because the Mālikī deem this not as a footnote or a subset of analogy. No, they deem it as an asl. And we're going to see the examples that it comes with. That based upon istihsan and maslaha comes another doctrine, which is ma jara bihi al-amal. Now, what does this mean? Let's say ma jara bihi al-amal literally means what the scholars have done. That's literally what it means. Ma jara bihi al-amal, what the local scholars have done. So based on istihsan, the scholars make a ruling, and this is what we do here. Okay? And the scholars deem it something to be okay and acceptable. Then they live upon it, they actually act upon it. That becomes stronger than the mashhur. It takes priority over the dominant opinion of the madhab. So, many people who follow a madhab, they always ask the question, what's the dominant opinion? Right? And they go by that. Well, in the Mālikī school, in your locality, it's localized. If in your locality, the muftis of the Mālikī school say, no, we're not going to act on the mashhur here. And they agree that another opinion is better for our purposes. And they all agree on that. That takes precedent over the mashhur. That shows that the madhab is flexible. Therefore, you cannot come upon a bunch of Mālikī scholars, a group of Mālikī scholars, or a community of Mālikis led by muftis and say, hold on, what are you doing? Khalil says this. What are you doing? Malik said that. Yes, Malik said that, but there's flexibility built in the madhab. If we determine that this is better for us than what Malik himself said or what Khalil said, that takes priority. What's an example? Example is very early on by one of the biggest shuyukh, Al-Fasi, Abdurrahman Al-Fasi. He deemed permissible the gatherings of group recitation of Quran in one voice in the mosque, whereas Malik deemed that to be an innovation. He said, no, a group sits, one recites, everyone listens. But Abdurrahman Al-Fasi was one of the biggest formulators, biggest nodes in the Mālikī school. He didn't decide this. He narrates that the shuyukh of Tunis have seen that no, what benefits the people more is that everyone recites in one voice. Because we've seen the people. Now, right now, if we had a gathering of 100 people, let's recite Surah Yasin. One person recite, everyone listens. What's going to happen? Immediately, it's going to be this. This is what you're going to see. People are going to scroll. People will be yawning. People will be tired. Why? Weakness. We have weakness. What's better? Now let's take 100 people, sit in a circle, recite Surah Yasin. Everyone open their mushaf and recite loudly. Everyone recites. So based upon this concept of maslaha and istihsan, they went against even their earlier opinions, and in Tunis it became an established practice. So once, not only is it theory, now it's practiced. Once you practice it, that dominates and that becomes the madhab in that locality. Hence, they took that and they applied it elsewhere and it became the madhab after that. That's why you can see that a madhab is upon something Very different from what the founders are upon, because the situation changed, the people changed, and the arena of the fatwa changed, the context changed, and this one example of ما جرى به العمل. The only difference we have with the modernists and the maqsadis is who is doing this. Only who is allowed to come together upon this and make a decision like that. It's only the muftis, the authorized muftis of the madhab. Not one person who studied in an academic university and he just wants to make something haram that's halal, to be halal. No, it has to be the authorized muftis of the madhab. All right, we've got to move quick now. So what else do we have in the Mālikī school that's a massive contribution is the concept of Jama'at al-Muslimin. The Mālikīs hold, listen to this, the ruler is a representative of the people. Therefore, in the absence of the ruler, the people can rule. But who's the people? Al-udul. ما رفع إلى العدول كأنه رفع إلى السلطان. That's the ruling. That's the qaida. So the udul, let's say we're out camping. Or we live far, far away in the Bedouin lands. Or in the desert. And a murder occurs. A murder happens. Are we just going to say, well, the government can't reach us. There's no sultan here. So that's it. Khalas, we have chaos? No. You have to form, the people have the right to form their own executive body. So therefore, they will raise the matter up to the udul. What does the word udul mean? Competent and trustworthy. The udul are the trustworthy and competent people. Okay? Even one of them is enough. So we don't have chaos and we don't have no order in the absence of the sultan, including living amongst non-Muslims. We have a concept of living amongst non-Muslims. In our books, one of our problems that exists today is, are we even allowed to be here? First of all, the Mālikīya, one Sharisi, he says about living amongst non-Muslims, is that, number one, we have a good opinion of people who live there, that they're only living there for a dire need or a reason. Number two, if it's da'wah, then it's permitted. Number three, they need law and order. They attain law and order through this doctrine right here. Jama'at al-Muslimin. Where's the pointer here? Jama'at al-Muslimin. We get a group together, but they cannot be a group of regular people. They have to be a group of scholars who know the madhab well, they know their fiqh well, and what happens? You would attribute yourself to them. You follow them. And then they are the final judgment on a lot of matters. And that's what we're going to get to in the relevance part. All right, going to move quickly so that we can go to Q&A. Removing corrupt rulers is an example. We know that we're supposed to follow the ruler, right? But when the party kings of Andalus came about, what does that mean? That means every city in Andalus broke away and became its own country. So you had like 20 states in Spain, 20 different cities in Spain. And as a result of that, that allowed for the Christian crusaders to come in and establish and do the Reconquista project and pit one against the other, and so all kinds of fitna and corruption. And the Muslims were about to lose Spain. So the Murabitun is a group that came about of scholars, of Mālikī scholars, and by using maslaha, they realized, they gave the fatwa, Al-Baji gave the fatwa to Yusuf ibn Tashfin, you are obligated to unify, because he had an army. They came out of Africa. They came out of Sinhaja in Africa. You are obligated now to go conquer these people based on maslaha. Well, what if a Muslim defends his city? You can kill him. Because overall, there will be great harm if we allow this division to take place. You must go and unify all of them. You have to unify all of them. So what is that? They use maslaha. Istihsan. Maslaha means what is the benefit? Istihsan is what does your mind think is good. And because of that, the Muslims in Andalus lived another couple hundred years. Here's another case. What happens to a woman when she divorces her husband? How much money can she take from him in Islam by Sharia? Who knows the answer to that question? Yes. Any sisters want to say? 0. She has no access to. Why would she get money from him? Like, what is the logic behind why she would have any money from him? All right, so in this case, in Andalus, there was a problem. The scholars, the people, the judges, everyone saw there is an increase in very poor and homeless women. There's an increase, there's a problem. So what did they do? This problem has to be solved. Why is this the case? Because a woman in the middle of her life, she gets divorced. Now she has no income. Middle of life, that means your dad's probably old or dead. Your brothers probably have a load of responsibility to handle. They can't handle feeding another person. And you're too old now to go and live with your brother. Your dad and your grandfather are dead. Your children are too young to help you. So there is that middle age where a woman becomes extremely vulnerable if she gets divorced. So what did the scholars do? The Mālikī judges used maslaha and istihsan to obligate a man. If you are divorcing a vulnerable woman who will be out on the streets, you have to still pay for her. We covered this already. Far from the Sultan, law and order is if a group of Muslims come together, they should elect a body of the righteous, of the udul, even if none of them is a mufti, and govern themselves based upon it. If we were out in the wild, let's hypothetically say we went camping in Colorado. 100 guys go camping in Colorado on a big trip. Then Armageddon happens, all electricity is lost, and we're stuck there. US government is in a civil war and can't help us. What do? We must elect a leader and a council, and that leader and council become our sultan. They have the rights now. We have to obey them. So each group of us will select a representative. Let's say my interest group, my people from New Jersey. We have to select one representative. A group of people from Pennsylvania came, representative. This is a big family that came, representative. These representatives come together, they select one of themselves. He becomes the sultan. We don't need anything else. We don't need anyone to validate us. Why? Because ruling yourself is based upon reason, and it's a divine command. And therefore we become obligated to follow that person, because that's law and order is based upon that. We talked about that. Future relevance. What about women who are abused in a marriage? A woman could be a convert. She has no Muslim dad, no Muslim relatives at all. Her husband abuses her, and she can't get a divorce. Her husband abuses her in a way that really can't be proven to the cops, can't be proven to anyone, and she's miserable in her life. Does the Sharia say you can't divorce yourself? You can seek a khula, but she has no money. The Mālikī scholars say they disallow this to continue just because there's no Muslim court. In the Sharia, the Muslim court, the judge would have said, what's the issue here? I'm being abused. Show me some evidence. Talk to me about it. Let's say she has no evidence. What do they say? Go get your friends. Go get other men in the community. They come. Is this woman a liar? No. Is she insane? No. Does she lie? No. Does she exaggerate? No. She's a sane, upright woman. Therefore, her call of abuse stands. They base this on Umar ibn Khattab. A woman came around pregnant. Single woman is pregnant. What does that mean? She fornicated. All right, come for hadd. Omar sat with the woman, bring me this woman who is walking around the streets pregnant with no husband. Bring this woman. Omar talks to the woman. This is not a fornicator. This is a righteous woman. Go get me the people from where she lives. The men. What do you say about this woman? The women, what do you say about her? She's righteous. She was raped. Yeah, Omar says, yeah, I believe she was raped. Therefore, no had punishment for her. Okay? In the absence of a court, the imam of the masjid, the local imam can do this. This is one of the applications that's used by the New York Sharia board. They use Mālikī fiqh to separate women from the husband in the case of abuse. But they use 3 shuyukh, and they have about a 3-month investigation that takes place to ensure nobody's lying and the actual abuse is taking place. They therefore bring the husband, whether he comes or not, they issue a fatwa saying, you are now free from him. Another application of this is on matters of disputation. It's unacceptable for the community to suffer from disputations, and therefore a group of scholars, you can attribute yourself to them. I follow them, and in the sight of Allah, they're like the sultan. So when does Ramadan begin? I'm going to get myself out of this dispute. I'm going to follow those scholars. Whatever they say is what it is, even if I have a different opinion. So the jama'ah ends the khilaf. In an Islamic country, why don't they dispute when Ramadan and Eid begin? Because the government makes the ruling, whether you like it or not, whatever it is. So likewise, in the non-Muslim lands, out in the Bedouin territories, where there's no government, no Islamic state, we are supposed to have a jama'ah of scholars led by, and we attribute ourselves to them, and we say whatever they decide is the ruling. And I can stand before Allah Ta'ala, if Allah asks me, why did you do this? I point to Jama'at al-Muslimin. So again, the only difference that we have is the training of these scholars. So when these scholars should be trained in classical usul al-fiqh, they should be trained in knowledge, and then they can form this kind of fatwa council, and that is a hujjah in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, that's it. So we